The scarecrow, the one we all thought was the Thompsons' Halloween decoration, waved at me across the street right as I locked my car. This happened last year on Halloween night. I'm a night shift nurse, and I'd just pulled a hellish 12-hour shift. By the time I guided my old Honda Civic onto my suburban street, it was almost 10 p.m. The trick-or-treating was clearly over. The street was dead quiet, save for the streetlight buzz that cast sickly yellow halos in the wind, making the tree shadows look like claws. Our neighborhood goes all in for Halloween, especially the Thompsons, who live on the corner. They always overdo it, and that scarecrow was their masterpiece for the year. It had been staked in their front lawn for almost a week. It was too realistic, dressed in a raggedy red flannel shirt, muddy work gloves, and a lumpy burlap sack for a head, with a jagged smile painted on in black. It was tied to a T-post, dried straw poking from its cuffs and pant legs. I parked in my driveway and killed the engine. The air smelled damp, like rotting leaves. Exhausted, I got out and hit the lock button on my fob. Beep beep. I yawned, turning my back to the car. As I stuck my key in the front door, a movement in my peripheral vision caught my eye. I froze. Slowly, I turned my head. Half a block away, at the edge of the streetlight's glow, the scarecrow's left arm, the one with the work glove, was raised to about shoulder height. Then slowly, deliberately, it moved up and down. A wave. My blood went cold. It wasn't the wind. The air was practically still. It was a clear, conscious gesture. I'm just tired, I told myself. It's some high school kid playing a prank, dressed in the costume. I stared at it. It was perfectly still again, back in its rigid pose. I fumbled with the lock, shoved the door open, and slammed it shut behind me, throwing all 3 deadbolts. I leaned against the wood, my heart hammering against my ribs, trying to break out. I ran to the living room and yanked all the curtains shut. I needed a shower. I needed to wash the hospital smell and the night's chill off me. I went upstairs to the master bathroom. I didn't turn on the light, using just the faint moonlight coming through the window. It's frosted glass, so I could only see blurry shapes. I was about to turn on the faucet when I stopped. A faint creak from downstairs. The front porch boards, like someone had stepped on them. I turned off the bathroom fan and listened. Nothing. I let out a breath. Just the old house settling. I was just on edge. I peeled off my scrubs, ready to step into the tub. And then I heard it. Thud. A dull, heavy impact coming from downstairs. It wasn't a knock. It was the sound of something heavy and soft leaning against my front door. I held my breath. Then came the scratching. A dry, abrasive shh. It sounded like a handful of straw being dragged across the wood. I bolted from the bathroom, grabbing my phone from the nightstand. I crept to the bedroom window and parted the blinds just a fraction of an inch. My heart stopped. The scarecrow. It wasn't on the corner anymore. It was standing on my front lawn, right between the driveway and the porch, less than 20 feet from my front door. Its burlap sack head was tilted up, staring directly at my bedroom window. In the moonlight, the painted, jagged smile looked impossibly wide and grotesque. Click. Every light in the house went out. The power was gone. My phone screen was the only light. And in the tomb-like silence that followed, I heard the clean, sharp tinkle, crash, of the living room window shattering. It was inside. I slammed my hand over my mouth to stop the scream. I backed away, stumbling into the walk-in closet and pulling several coats in front of me. I huddled in the dark, my fingers shaking so hard I could barely dial 911. I heard it. It was moving in the house, not with human footsteps. It was a heavy, lurching drag thump, as if one of its legs was stiff, useless, and had to be dragged. A thick, pungent smell wafted up the stairs. Not the clean scent of dry hay. It was the smell of rot, of damp earth and moldy pumpkins. Drag thump. It was coming up the stairs. The sound echoed in the hallway. It stopped right outside my bedroom door. Through the crack in the closet, I watched the doorknob slowly turn. Click. The door was locked. I stared at the door, tears streaming down my face. A dead, heavy silence. Wham! The entire door frame rattled. It was throwing itself against the door. Wham! The sound of wood splintering. Wham! The door exploded inward, slamming against the wall. A tall, shambling silhouette stood in the doorway. In the faint moonlight from the window, I could see the flannel shirt and the burlap head. It scanned the room. And then, the burlap head slowly swiveled towards the closet. It knew. It came inside with that awful drag-thump gait. Time seemed to freeze. I could smell the decay on it. It stopped right in front of the closet. Then it yanked the door open. No! I screamed. Primal survival took over. I didn't even think. I grabbed a handful of metal hangers and threw them, as hard as I could, at its face. It let out a low, guttural grunt and recoiled just a step. It was all I needed. I lunged, pushing past it, or past the clothes, and scrambled out. I was on my hands and knees, crawling blind in the dark, desperate for the stairs. I barely made it to the hallway when a hand clamped around my ankle. The hand, it was wearing that coarse work glove, but the grip, it was wrong. It didn't feel like a hand. It had none of the warmth or fleshy give of a human palm. It felt like a bundle of cold, rigid twigs bound tight, closing around my bone through the glove. It didn't bend. It just closed. I kicked frantically at its arm with my free foot. I was still clutching my phone. I twisted around, and using the only heavy object I had, I brought the screen side of the phone down, hard on the hand gripping me. Crack! A sharp, clean sound. Not like bone, like dry wood snapping. The grip released. It was followed by a noise, not a scream, but a low, wet gurgle, like air being forced through a pile of wet mulch. I didn't look back. I scrambled and fell down the stairs, knocking over a hallway table in the dark. I ran into the kitchen, and instead of fumbling with the back door, I threw my shoulder against the window it had already broken. Glass shards sliced my arms and face, but I didn't care. I tumbled out onto the back lawn, got to my feet, and sprinted to my neighbor's house, hammering on their door with my bloody fists. The police came. They cleared my house. The living room window was shattered. My bedroom door was off its hinges. The closet was a mess. But the house was empty. They found the Thompsons, who were horrified. Their scarecrow was indeed gone. They'd assumed it was a college prank. The police found the T-post on my front lawn, where it had been ripped out of the ground and discarded. Their theory, a deranged transient or someone high on PCP, had stolen the costume and decided to break into my house at random. They were kind, but they didn't believe me. Not about the feel of the hand. Not about the drag-thump sound. I never stayed in that house again. I lived with my sister for a few months before moving to a different city. It's been a year. I still can't sleep. The next morning, after the police left, my sister went back with me to get some essentials. I found something on my bedroom floor, right in front of the closet. The cops had apparently dismissed it as debris. It was a small pile of damp, darkening, rotting straw. And in the middle of it was a small, finger-length piece of dry birch branch. The break at one end was fresh. All four of my tires were slashed. But the gashes weren't just flat. They were stuffed, packed full of damp, matted clumps of blonde hair, a color I recognized instantly as my neighbor Jenna's. All of this happened on October 30th, 2022. Mischief Night. My name is Frank. 3 months after finalizing the divorce with Sarah, I'd taken what little money I had left and fled the city for this small rental at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac. The place was okay, just isolated. My only neighbor was Jenna, who lived about 50 yards away. We'd only ever exchanged waves while getting the mail. This was my first mischief night in the neighborhood. I'd heard the local teens liked to cause trouble, smashing pumpkins, TPNG houses, that sort of thing. I was in no mood to deal with it. My plan was to kill all the lights by 10 p.m., put on my headphones, and pretend I didn't exist. Which is exactly what I did. Around 11 p.m., I was listening to a podcast when I heard a faint hissing sound from outside. It wasn't kids laughing or yelling, just a very steady rhythmic hiss. I hit pause. The sound continued. I crept to the living room window and peeked through a gap in the blinds. My driveway was lit by a single, harsh streetlight. In the middle of it stood a person. Just one. He was dressed in a dark hoodie and jeans, holding a can of spray paint, and was intently painting something on the asphalt. It wasn't some crude graffiti. It was precise. He was painting a massive, almost perfect circle, and in the center of it, an equally perfect, staring eye. He painted with a slow, deliberate calm that sent a chill right into my gut. This wasn't a teenage prank. This was something else. When he finished, he stopped. He gently placed the spray can beside him and just stood in the center of the circle he'd drawn. His back was to my house, facing the empty street. He just stood there. A minute passed. Then two. My heart started hammering against my ribs. Why wasn't he running? Why wasn't he laughing? The total, silent stillness was 1,000 times more terrifying than any vandalism. It felt like a ritual. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably 5 minutes, he finally moved. He didn't run. He just calmly walked up my porch path, straight to my front door. I recoiled from the window, holding my breath. I heard his footsteps stop on the welcome mat. My door is the old-fashioned kind, with a pane of frosted glass in the middle. I watched in horror as a dark silhouette blocked the streetlight. He pressed his face, his entire face, right up against the frosted glass. I couldn't see his features, but I knew he was there. And then I heard it. H-H-H-H-H-H-H. H-H-H-H-H-H-H. A slow, heavy breath. So close I could picture the fog appearing and fading on the other side of the glass. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers shaking too badly to unlock it. I was just working up the nerve to yell at him when the shadow on the glass moved. He held something up, pressing it flat against the pane. A square. A photograph. A Polaroid. My blood turned to ice. Even through the distorted glass, I could recognize it. It was a bedroom. It was Jenna's bedroom. I recognized the quilt she'd had hanging on her clothesline. Jenna was in the bed, lying on her side, her long blonde hair fanned out on the pillow. She appeared to be asleep. The man's other hand came up, and he tapped the glass with his knuckles. Tap, tap, tap. Then, he held up a small piece of paper. I could just barely make out the words scrawled in thick, black marker. You're next. Get the hell away from my house. I finally roared, my voice cracking. A low, guttural laugh came from the other side of the door. The shadow pulled back from the glass. I heard footsteps running off the porch, but not toward the street. He was running across my lawn, toward Jenna's house. Half a second later, I heard the sound. A terrible, tearing crash that ripped the night apart. KRSHH. The sound of a glass door being completely shattered. No. I was already dialing 911. Someone's breaking into my neighbor's house. 114, Dead End Drive. He was just at my door, now he's in her house. I didn't wait for the dispatcher's reply. I dropped the phone, grabbed the aluminum baseball bat I kept by the door, and ran outside. I'm not a hero. I don't know why I did it. The adrenaline had just completely taken over. Jenna's front door was wide open, the glass panel on it smashed to pieces. I screamed her name. Jenna! I burst into her living room. He was there, the figure in the hoodie. He was standing over Jenna, who was crumpled in a heap by the sofa. He was holding a tire iron. He turned to face me. He was wearing a mask. A smooth white mask, but it was plated in perfect chrome like a mirror. All I could see was my own terrified, distorted reflection holding a baseball bat. Jenna, I whispered. She let out a low moan. Alive. That was enough. The mirrored mask invader took one step toward me. I let out an animal roar and swung the bat with all my strength, aiming for his head. But he was fast. He brought the tire iron up to block. Clang! The impact sent a painful shock up my entire skeleton. He shoved hard, sending me stumbling back over a small coffee table. He immediately followed up, bringing the tire iron down in an overhead arc. I rolled frantically to the side as the metal bar slammed into the floor where I'd just been. He wrenched it free and kicked me hard in the knee. A blinding flash of pain made me collapse. He was on me in an instant, pinning me to the floor with his knee on my chest. He raised the tire iron high. The mirrored mask reflected the ceiling light. It was over. I was going to die in my neighbor's living room. "Get off him!" I heard Jenna's voice, weak and furious. "Whump!" followed by the sound of shattering ceramic. Jenna, God bless her, had grabbed a table lamp and smashed it over the invader's back with all her remaining strength. He screamed, a high-pitched, piercing sound like a punctured tire, and staggered, losing his balance. The tire iron slipped from his grip. It was all the chance I needed. Still on the floor, I gripped the bat and swung it horizontally with every ounce of power I had, connecting squarely with his lower leg. I heard a sickening, wet crack. He went down like a sack of cement. We didn't stay to check. I scrambled to my feet, ignoring the fire in my knee, and grabbed Jenna's arm. "Run!" We half-limped, half-dragged each other out of her house, across the lawn, and back into mine. I slammed the door and threw the deadbolt. We both slid to the floor, our backs against the door, gasping for air. That's when the first siren cut through the night. The police were fast. They swarmed Jenna's house, weapons drawn. But it was empty. He was gone. He'd apparently dragged himself out the back door with a broken leg and vanished into the woods behind the house. The police found the tire iron. They found the broken lamp. They found a significant amount of blood on the floor. Not mine, not Jenna's. But they didn't find him. Jenna had a concussion and a fractured wrist, but she was alive. As for the Polaroid, the cops figured he'd taken it through her bedroom window just before coming to my house. The police took our statements. They photographed the bizarre symbol on my driveway. They classified it as an aggravated home invasion, a targeted attack. But they had no suspects. Jenna went to stay with her sister that night and never came back. I couldn't blame her. I stayed up the rest of the night, clutching that baseball bat, staring at my front door. The next morning, Halloween day, I went outside to see the driveway in the light. And that's when I saw my car. It's what I said at the beginning. All 4 of my tires were slashed. But the gashes weren't just flat. They were stuffed, packed full of damp, matted clumps of blonde hair. A color I recognized instantly as my neighbor Jenna's. He must have cut her hair before he came to my house. The police couldn't explain it. They bagged the hair as evidence, but I could see it on their faces. It was too weird, too personal. I moved out now. I paid to break the lease. I didn't care. But I still have nightmares about that smooth, reflective mask showing me nothing but my own fear. Oh, and the symbol on the driveway. I went back a month later to get my security deposit. The landlord said he'd tried everything, pressure washer, industrial solvents, even painting over it with blacktop sealer. But you can still see it. Faint, but it's there. And I, staring coldly up at the sky. The dummy in my neighbor's front yard, the one in the torture chamber display, tied to an old wooden chair with a burlap sack over its head. Its fingers were tapping on the armrest. And it wasn't a random twitch. It was desperately, unmistakably tapping out SOS in Morse code. I live on a quiet street. My neighbor, Mr. Harrison, was a recluse who everyone just sort of left alone. He was a contractor, or at least he used to be. His one contribution to the neighborhood was his annual Halloween display. And I mean, this guy went all out. Professional grade, hyper-realistic, and always deeply disturbing. This year, he'd turned his entire front lawn into a medieval torture scene. There was a guillotine, a rack, and a bunch of other things I didn't want to look at too closely. It was late on Halloween night, maybe 11 p.m. The trick-or-treaters were long gone. I was just taking my German Shepherd, Buster, for his last walk before bed. The street was dead quiet, just the rustle of leaves and the sound of Buster's tags jingling. We got to Harrison's yard. His display was lit with flickering orange spotlights. As we got close, the figure in the chair, the centerpiece, suddenly jerked and started to shudder. I figured it was motion activated. "Creepy," I muttered to Buster, who let out a low growl. I stopped for a second, admiring the effect. It was really convincing. The dummy was dressed in torn clothes, its hands tied to the chair's arms with thick rope. And that's when I saw it. The fingers on the right hand. They weren't just twitching. They were tapping. My grandfather was in the Navy. He taught me Morse code as a kid, thought it was a fun game. I never forgot the basics. Tap, tap, tap. Tap, tap, tap. Tap, tap, tap. SOS. My blood turned to ice. It had to be a coincidence. A very, very sick part of the display. I fumbled for my phone, my hands shaking. I pretended to be checking a text, but I opened my video camera and hit record. I held it at my side, angled toward the chair. "Hey, cool setup," I said, my voice cracking. The figure in the chair froze completely. Then the fingers started again. This time slower, more deliberate. Tap, 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 tap. Tap. Tap, tap, tap. Tap, tap. HELP. The front door of Harrison's house creaked open. I jumped, nearly dropping my phone. Harrison was standing in the dark doorway, just a silhouette. "Enjoying the show," he called out. His voice was unsettlingly calm. He stepped onto the porch, into the orange light. He was a big guy, but he moved quietly. And he was holding a claw hammer. "Took me a long time," he said, walking onto the grass. "Wanted to get the details just right. I couldn't breathe. I tried to pull Buster's leash, to act casual. Yeah, it's amazing, Mr. Harrison. Really realistic." My heart was trying to hammer its way out of my chest. "We should probably get going. Late for." I didn't even have an excuse. "No, wait." He moved, blocking the sidewalk. He was between me and the street. "You have to appreciate the craftsmanship up close. Most people just walk by." He reached out and grabbed my jacket sleeve. His grip was like a steel trap. "It looks so real, doesn't it?" He started pulling me, dragging me off the sidewalk and onto his lawn, toward the figure in the chair. Buster sensed it. He wasn't growling anymore. He erupted. It was a terrifying, protective bark that I'd only heard once or twice. "Get off me!" I yelled, ripping my arm back. The jacket sleeve tore. As I yanked free, Buster lunged, snapping at the hand that had grabbed me. Harrison roared. It wasn't a human sound. Without a second's hesitation, he swung the hammer. It connected with Buster's side with a sickening, wet thud. Buster let out a single, piercing yelp of pain and collapsed onto the grass. Something in my head snapped. The fear just evaporated, replaced by white-hot, blinding rage. Harrison turned to me, his face twisted, raising the hammer again. I didn't run. I looked around wildly, and my eyes landed on the cemetery, part of the display. I grabbed the nearest prop tombstone. It wasn't the cheap styrofoam kind. It was solid, heavy resin or concrete, meant to withstand the weather. With a scream, I swung it with both hands like a baseball bat, right into Harrison's leg. I heard a sharp pop and a wet crunch. He screamed a high, bubbling sound, and dropped the hammer, collapsing and clutching his knee. I didn't wait to see what he'd do. I scooped up Buster, who was whimpering, and I ran. I bolted down the street, my lungs on fire, not stopping until I was inside my own house with the deadbolt slammed shut. I dialed 911, my voice shaking so badly I could barely tell the dispatcher my own address. The police found the kid, a 17-year-old from the next town over, reported missing 3 days earlier. Harrison had kidnapped him. He'd been keeping him in the basement and on Halloween night decided to hide him in plain sight. He was counting on everyone thinking it was just another one of his fucked-up decorations. Buster's ribs were broken, but he survived. He's sleeping at my feet right now. On the other hand, I don't sleep much. I keep seeing it. Not Harrison's face, not the hammer. Just that hand. Those fingers. Tapping silently in the dark while the whole neighborhood, the whole world just walked right by.